Good evening. I hereby call to order the City of Ithaca Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for June 1st, 2021. The board operates under the provisions of the Ithaca City Charter, Ithaca Zoning Ordinance, Ithaca Sign Ordinance, and the board's own rules of procedure. The board comprises 4 members nominated by the mayor and approved by Common Council. Board members present tonight are Stephen Henderson, David Barkin, as well as Megan Wilson, Senior Planner and Secretary to the Board. I am Suzanne Charles, Chairman of the Board. The Secretary to the Board, Megan Wilson, will call each chair in the order listed in the agenda. Appellants will then have a maximum of 5 minutes to present new material or highlight aspects of their appeal. Board members may question appellants on any areas requiring clarification. Tonight, we have 2 appeals. The appeal for 109 East York is postponed until the July meeting. Full consideration of appeals requires a public hearing, deliberation, and then voting by the board. These actions occur only after the appellant has filed appropriate documents with the Zoning Division and Planning and Development Board. Public hearings include testimony from, quote, interested parties, unquote. The board considers interested parties persons who live or work or own property within 750 feet of the property, or who are authorized representatives of recognized adjacent neighborhood civic groups, or who are elected city officials. Board members may question testifying interested parties on any areas requiring clarification. Persons who do not meet the board's interested party definition will not be heard, except that an interested party may designate an agent to speak in place of the interested party and on the interested party's behalf. Interested parties supporting an appeal will testify first, followed by interested parties in opposition. Comments from each interested party are limited to 3 minutes. Appellants will then be allowed to rebut the testimony of opposing interested parties or request adjournment to obtain evidence necessary for rebuttal. Appellants' comments must be limited to strict rebuttal of issues raised by those opposed and will be limited to 5 minutes. A timer will sound at the end of each speaker's allotted time. While we do not adhere to strict rules of evidence, we do consider this a quasi-judicial proceeding, and we base our decisions on the official record. The official record consists of application materials filed with the Zoning Division, correspondence relating to cases received by the Zoning Division, the Planning and Development Board's own findings and recommendations, if any, and the record of tonight's meeting. A recording is being made of this meeting. Therefore, it is essential anyone wanting to be heard speaks clearly so their comments are recorded and heard by everyone. Extraneous comments will not be considered by the board. We ask everyone to limit their comments to the zoning issues of each appeal and not comment on matters beyond the board's jurisdiction. Following the appellant's rebuttal, the appeal hearing will be closed and the board will begin deliberation. The board is required to render a decision within 62 days of the public hearing's closure. Once the hearing is closed, no further testimony will be taken. It takes 3 votes to approve a motion to grant a variance or favorable interpretation. In the event of a tie vote, an appeal is denied. Tonight's online meeting format requires us to manage public comment differently, but the board still welcomes input from interested parties. Tonight's appeals are available for public review on the city website, and the meeting is being streamed live online via YouTube. Interested parties are welcome to address the board as part of this online meeting or may submit written comments to be read into the record during the public meeting. Megan, would you kindly call our first case?
Opening our applicants now, and our first appeal is number 3185 for 106 Cascadilla Park Road. It's appeal of property owners Jason Houghton and Michael Scanlon for an area variance from section 325.8, column 6, lot area, column 7, lot width, column 10, lot coverage by buildings, column 11, front yard, and column 13, other side yard requirements of the zoning ordinance. The applicants propose to construct a covered parking space in the front yard of the property at 106 Cascadilla Park Road. Due to the slope topography of the site, the parking space will be cut into the slope, enclosed on 3 sides with a landscape retaining wall and covered by a wooden roof to create a carport. The carport will have a green roof that will also provide additional outdoor space for the property owners. The construction of the carport within the front yard will exacerbate the existing front yard deficiency, reducing the front yard to 6.5 of the required 25 feet. In addition, the construction of the new carport will exacerbate an existing deficiency in maximum lot coverage by buildings. The project will result in 26% lot coverage by buildings exceeding the 20% allowed by the zoning ordinance. The property has existing deficiencies in lot area, lot width, and other side yard that will not be exacerbated by this proposal. The property is located in an R1A use district in which the proposed use is permitted. However, section 325.32 requires that an area variance be granted before a building permit is issued.
Okay, appellants, you have 5 minutes to present your case.
Hi, so my name is Jason Houghton. I'm the owner. My partner and I are owners at 106 Cascadilla Park Road. First, I just want to thank Megan for being patient with me to this point. We've been through several meetings to get here, and I'm thankful that I finally get the opportunity to speak. I didn't have that opportunity at the DPW meeting, and I didn't understand that I had the opportunity at the development meeting, so I'm happy that I get to speak now. So my partner and I have been living here at this residence for 4 years. We love this house. We love this neighborhood. We love the character of the neighborhood. And when we bought the house, we knew that it only had off-street parking. But you know, as we've lived here over time, we've grown to have some issues with that off-street parking, especially in winter. And you know, with this project, we're really hoping to address those issues and create a space where we can comfortably live here for the long term. And I just want to start by saying that I understand that prior owners, if they don't live within a certain radius, can't make a comment. But I know the prior owner of this house sent an email expressing the same concerns that I'm about to express, and that they had hoped to do a similar project as well. And I do know that another owner had hoped for the same thing. But you know, we love this house. We want to make a commitment to it. So that's why we're going through this process and willing to make the very large investment it's going to take to, you know, to create some off-street parking. So, you know, our main issue is safety. We live on a rather large slope, and in the winter we have to basically parallel park on that slope, and it's rather difficult. In addition, we have an exceptionally high curb. So once we've parallel parked, we can't open our passenger door. We can only really, we have to let people out before we park. And then when to exit the car, to put anything in the car, we have to open up the driver's side door into traffic. And it's, you know, there's not a lot of traffic on this road, but nonetheless, it's always a concern. So in addition, in the winter, you know, parking on the slope, we have to step up from a sloped road onto a very high curb that's, you know, not standard by any means, onto a sloped sidewalk, which can be very slippery. So this project really kind of addresses that and flattens out some of those surfaces, allows us a flatter surface to park on, and one that might be, you know, a little protected from the snow. And I understand, you know, in looking at the drawings, there are steps in the sidewalk. We've gone through the BPW, we've gone through the Board of Public Works. They unanimously supported our project once they fully understood the site. And actually, we think the curb cut will provide a benefit to pedestrians. It'll allow them to enter and exit the sidewalk at street level, rather than having to step up an exceptionally high curb or use steps that are at the end of the sidewalk on our neighbor's property. You know, that's really the main reason that we're doing this project. We would like a safer place to park, just one spot, a secure place to park. And you know, in doing this project, we understand that this neighborhood, it has very unique character. We're very committed to the character of the neighborhood. I've gone through many contractors trying to find one who understood my vision for this parking space and you know, would even provide some good suggestions to enhance the character of the neighborhood. And you know, that's when I finally ended up with Noah at Stream. So it's been a process to get to this point. And I just want to say, I don't think our parking spot would deviate greatly from the character of the neighborhood. If you've been down this street, you know that many of the houses have little to no front yard, parking garages that are right on the road, oftentimes parking that goes directly into their cellars. So, you know, I feel our project in putting a parking space in the front yard is not really deviating a lot from some of the other parking situations in the neighborhood. In addition, our parking space would be below the level of the house. I know that one of the prior property owners had hoped to basically put a tunnel with a parking space into the cellar of the house. So, which you see on many other houses in this neighborhood. So, you know, in that respect, I don't think this project deviates greatly from many of the other parking situations in the neighborhood. So yeah, we're very committed to maintaining the character of the neighborhood and the design of the parking space. I know the drawing currently doesn't show all that, it's just the dimensions. But we've discussed this with our neighbors, and you know, we'd be very excited if we're allowed to move forward to, you know, get their feedback and really create a space that enhances the neighborhood. And so I just, you know, also want to address the impact on the neighborhood. You know, I feel like being allowed to have this parking space will allow us to take one car off the road. We currently do have 2 cars, which we park in front of our house. We'd like to get rid of one of those cars. And if we, you know, I know this is just a statement, but if we're able to have a car off street, we intend to get rid of that other car. So, you know, if frankly, without an off-street parking, we aren't sure if we're going to be able to have that long-term commitment to the residents in the house. I also want to say that, you know, I know some other neighbors have expressed concern about the tree. Saving the large tree in front of our house is definitely a priority. It's one of the reasons we're placing the parking space where we are. In my conversation with prior contractors, you know, and even with an employee of Thompson Tree Service who had come out and look at the tree, I also told them about our intentions. All of them said that they don't feel this will be a problem for the tree, and will help preserve it. And even if it, you know, we are at most at risk from any damage to that tree. So we would monitor it closely. And if, you know, there were any issues, we'd certainly address it. And lastly, about impact to the neighborhood, I also wanted to address runoff. I've taken some videos when it last rained heavily on Wednesday to show that water on this side of the road essentially stays on this side of the road. It does stay on this side of the road. The road is crowned, and no water from our property or even the property above us really crosses the street. It flows in what is quite an effective gully down the street to the end of the street. So I don't think any water crossing the street to other neighbors' properties due to this project is honestly very plausible. I would also state that, you know, we're talking about one parking space. We're taking a slope and essentially flattening it a bit and creating a partial green roof. So I would expect that, you know, any impact on runoff would be minimal or negligible. And I think those, you know, those who've seen the site would agree with me. So, you know, in conclusion, I just want to say we recognize this is a unique neighborhood. We're very committed to doing this project respectfully for the neighborhood. I've tried to involve the neighbors as much as I can to this point and get their feedback. You know, we really feel that this project will enhance the livability of this residence. It will. We're just looking for one secure, safer spot to park. Where in the winter, you know, it's a challenge currently. So hopefully we can move forward and create a really nice space for us.
Thank you. Stephen and David, do you have questions for Jason or Noah?
Not off the top of my head. Do you, Suzanne?
Well, there was oh, wait a minute. Megan, are we doing this right? We'll have the questions and then we'll read the pro and against.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
If you have questions, informational questions. For
How do you respond to, did you hear the critique of there's a tree on a neighboring property and how your construction may negatively affect that neighboring tree?
I had not heard that criticism, but that tree is, it's got to be a good 50, 60 feet. I mean, minimum from where we would be constructing. There's the parking, if looking at our property, to the right would be the parking space. To the left is our large maple tree. Then there's a large slope downward to our neighbor's residence. And then her tree is probably 10 feet within her residence.
More than that, 30.
Yeah, in all honesty, I think that's a stretch.
Okay, and I don't know if the other board members remember that. I thought I remembered reading that in one of the notes we'll see in a moment. I have another question also about the roof of the, we're calling this a carport, right? It does sort of resemble a garage because of the way that the earth is forming the walls of it. But the roof of the carport, you said it would be a green roof. So could you explain a little bit more what that is? Is it and how drainage is accomplished? I mean, what is this a green roof that you would actually like walk on and use, or is it just a green roof that's absorbing rainwater?
Well, in all honesty, some of those details haven't been worked out. I see some of the portion of the upper half of the upper part of the carport, the covering of the carport, being a green roof. I'd like something garden looking. So when we look out from our porch, again, this will sit below the porch, we see a nice garden. And then on extending out from that and over the front part of the carport, I see currently basically some craftsman style accents that would mirror many of the pergola looking craftsman style accents that are over some of the parking spaces on other houses in the street. And then that would itself have some vines and plants growing on it. That's our current vision. There would not be walking on the roof. It would not be a space for walking.
And do you see it as, I suppose the way you've described, I know it's still to be determined, but as do you see it as also a method to slow rainwater's entrance into the sewer system versus sheeting off of, say an asphalt roof or something like that?
Right. So
should it have that property?
I'm assuming the green roof itself will, absorb some of that water. It'll be a flatter surface, and we would have drainage off to the sides of the carport, I would assume. And then I don't want the bottom of the carport to be asphalt. I'm hoping more for a permeable surface, surface, maybe with a cobblestone or paver apron at the front, but then the surface, the bottom surface of the carport being more permeable.
The driving surface.
The driving surface.
Any other questions?
Is there stormwater on that street that you could tie into, or would it go into the street and then down to the culvert?
It goes into the street and down to the culvert. It's actually, I've got a video I could show right now of the heavy rain we had last Wednesday. It's actually very effective, and down toward the bottom of the street, it's quite large. Stormwater hasn't been an issue on this road.
If you were to disturb the soil, then the new area you could then channel that new location into the street, correct?
Yes, yes.
Great, thanks.
And I'll tell you, and also, currently our neighbor has a retaining wall, and in the winter during freezing and thawing cycles, it trickles down a little bit of water right onto the sidewalk at the base of our steps and creates a lot of ice. So we're hoping also with, redoing the sidewalk there to have that drainage just, not sit on the sidewalk, but then flow right onto into the street.
Thank you.
And again, I can show videos. The water, the street is angled quite a bit up against the curb. It handles a lot of water quite well, and it's rather steep, so that the water flows down to the bottom of the hill effectively.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions by the board, then Megan, are there the interested parties supporting here and against us? Are they here, or just we have the letters to read in?
We do not have anyone here to speak in person. There were 2 letters that went out in packet, and a couple more that were emailed today. I would say for the ones that were posted in the packet online, we don't need to read them. I'll just note who they were from and the address, but I can read the ones that came in today since they were not publicly available to read. So in support in the packet, you should have seen a letter of support from David Fellows at 111 Cascadilla Park Road. And sorry, I'm loading all the, also in support that came in today, I'll read this, is from Lawrence Gibbons and Richie Patterson, who live at 108 Cascadilla Park Road. Dear Board of Zoning Appeals, we write to endorse the zoning appeal by Mike Scanlon and Jason Houghton to create an off-street parking space at 106 Cascadilla Park Road. We live at 108 Cascadilla Park Road, so are the next door neighbors immediately uphill of the property. As the only other residents of the street on the street without off-street parking, we understand and sympathize with the frustrations in relying upon street parking here. We have discussed the design of the planned parking addition with Mike and Jason and are confident that they will preserve the character of the neighborhood. We are also confident they will consult extensively with us and other neighbors in developing the design. We note that the planned sidewalk steps will not significantly affect us or foot traffic. The terminus of the sidewalk, which is in front of our house, requires 3 steps down to reach street level. So the sidewalk is already not handicap accessible. From our porch, we often watch passerby on the street, and the sidewalk is rarely used. Most pedestrians walk on the street. Sincerely, Lawrence Gibbons and Richie Patterson. And the other comments that I've received are in opposition or more neutral to the request. There was the comment in the packet from Margarita Fabrizio at 105 Cascadilla Park Road. The board also today received by email a letter or an email from Jennifer Gunn at 104 Cascadilla Park Road, which I'll read. I own the property of 104 Cascadilla Park Road downhill from my neighbors entering the appeal. I have several concerns about this project. 1, it involves removing a large portion of dirt from the front of the property. I'm concerned about the health of their large maple tree and my equally large maple tree immediately downhill on my property. The change in water drainage or seepage of auto chemicals could damage these magnificent trees. The same changes might damage my garden beds. I am concerned that water could also be redirected towards my house, causing my basement to flood. 3, the carport sounds more like a garage to me, although there's no visual, so I don't think it would look attractive or fit in. The plan to have a garden on top will cause runoff of water and chemicals onto my property. 4, the loss of one parking spot will cause an increase in the number of cars parking too close to my driveway, making it dangerous for me to back in or out. This has been a chronic problem over the 35 years I've lived here. I do hope the city will be able to lower the current 2-foot-high sidewalk to a normal height, reducing one inconvenience of on-street parking at 106. Jennifer H. Gunn. And the last comment I will read is from Brian McCracken, the city's historic preservation planner. Thank you for the opportunity to review the proposed carport project at 106 Cascadilla Park Road. Cascadilla Park Road and the homes along it are not locally designated historic resources and do not fall under the purview of the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission. However, the street and the fine collection of turn-of-the-century homes along it have been determined by the New York State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, to be eligible for listing in the state and national registers of historic places. Please see the attached screenshot of the New York State Cultural Resources Inventory System. As noted in the draft Cascadilla Park Road Historic Resources Survey 2011, the early 20th century architecture, topography, natural setting, and street plan of this unique neighborhood create a unique environment that is worthy of recognition and preservation. With this determination by the SHPO, 106 Cascadilla Park Road should be considered a historic resource for the purposes of conducting environmental review under the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the City Environmental Quality Review Ordinance. The project under consideration involves changing the topography of the front yard of 106 Cascadilla Park Road. This action will change the historic resources relationship with its site and could have impact on quality and character of the resource and the historic neighborhood as a whole. For this reason, the environmental impact of the proposed project should be assessed through a completion of a full environmental assessment form. Thank you for your consideration, Brian McCracken.
And Megan, is now the time to read in the planning boards?
I will do that too, thank you. The planning board does not identify any negative long-term planning impacts as it relates to the comprehensive plan. There was not unanimous support or dissent from the project. The board discussed the following considerations. The board would normally not seek to allow front yard parking. However, this is a unique site and unique street. The board understands that the Board of Public Works has reviewed and approved the project and the engineering staff has thoroughly vetted it. It may be beneficial on this unique street to get a car off the road, though it removes an on-street parking spot and conflicts with the urban design principle that the street is public. The applicant is asking for a large variance for the front yard. There's noted concern about runoff and construction practices and accessibility concerns.
Thank you, Megan. So this is, I mean, it's clear as to why the homeowner would want this, of the, you know, how dangerous and how inconvenient it is to park on the street in that really unique area of Ithaca. But, you know, and as we've heard, the neighborhood has historic characteristics, and this is quite a departure. I mean, it's a carport, but it's also quite a big project and quite a big difference, change to the neighborhood. So, Stephen and David, I propose that we've had the public hearing, that we direct the staff to undertake an environmental review upon the suggestion of Mr. McCracken, to better understand, so that we can better understand the you know, what the implications of this project. Do the other two members, do you agree?
I do, yeah. I thank the applicant for their patience, but due to the concerns, this is another process that has to go forward first, you know, from the direction of the planning staff.
Stephen?
Yeah, I was just going to second what David's saying there, but I think that with the concerns, we need to at least look at those concerns.
Yeah, and Jason, I hope you understand it. It's, you know, it's, I think we're at a little bit in the dark as to really understanding the implications, and the environmental review would help us.
No, I understand. If I'm allowed to speak, I understand. I want to do this the right way. I want to allay concerns where they have them. I just want to reiterate, we're committed to doing this right. We're committed to doing this in character with the neighborhood. Otherwise, we wouldn't move forward.
I'd like to make a motion that we undertake the environmental review and then postpone the completion, or I guess what's the terminology, Megan, for our deliberation for the July meeting?
Yes, so you want to postpone the consideration of the appeal till the environmental review is complete, which would be the July meeting.
Okay.
Is there a second? Sorry, Suzanne, not to jump on your.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So I guess I will poll the members on that, even though I saw hands already. Mr. Barkin,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
and Ms. Charles.
Yes.
Okay. So I will go ahead and prepare the environmental review and circulate it, and I will probably be in touch with you, Jason and Noah, just to get additional information that's needed to cover all the concerns. I've heard stormwater issues, any traffic impacts, and we'll take a look at historic resources, and I'll follow up with Brian a little bit more to get some more information on that, and then we will bring this back in July.
All right, well, thank you.
Could I ask a quick question, Megan, about just
Yeah.
process?
Sure.
Would it be, I mean, one thing I want to, first of all, I want to say Jason did a fantastic job. I didn't even have to say a word. So great job, Jason. But in terms of the historic resources and impacts on that, I mean, clearly there needs to be an architectural solution that is in character and consistent with the rest of the neighborhood.
Mhm.
And as Jason sort of hinted, I mean, what we submitted was much more of a technical solution to what happens with the topography and the ground plane. I'm wondering, I'm assuming that the mitigation for the historic resources portion is going to require a greater level of detail and design. You know, Jason mentioned craftsman detailing, pergola kind of structures, different, treatments of materials for the ground plane and the walls. I guess I'm just wondering, at what point does that happen? Because we kind of entered this process assuming that would happen after we get the BZA, after we get the BPW, because those are complicated things. Then Jason kind of frankly spends money on actual design. But I'm just wondering, timing wise, is that something that would be helpful to do now and then present that to this board, present it to Brian, get input and feedback, or procedurally, can that still happen later? Maybe it's more of a condition that's placed on the approval, that there's at the approval of Brian later on or something like that. I don't know.
I think that's a good idea. And we can talk more, and I'll follow up with Brian on this as well too, but it could be something I certainly understand the wanting to hold on the complete design until whether the project in its
Just in
current form,
yeah.
in concept is something that can move forward. So I think your suggestion of working, having a preliminary conversation with a historic preservation planner, and then maybe continuing as a kind of a mitigation to continue to work with him on the design once you get to that point could be an option too.
Okay.
I think for our board's decision in July, I think, say, for example, understanding how the roof of the properties of the roof of the carport, for example, would be interesting. I mean, not to go through the design, but to be to be a little bit more specific, because then if whatever comes out of the environmental review, perhaps we would make conditions on that.
Right. Okay. Great.
I guess also for the applicant to reach out to Brian McCracken about the difference between a historical resource versus a historically designated neighborhood or structure, before you start working out the different costs of those designs and things like that, just clarify that before you bring forth
Okay.
a project for the
Can
BZA
Megan
that-
provide me that contact information?
I would absolutely help to connect you. I think that he'd be great to work with for you going forward too.
Okay,
So,
great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. I think then I will be in touch with you, Jason and Noah, in the next day or two, and we will see you back here in July.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Okay, Megan, can you call our
Yes,
next case
I
and our last
sure will.
case, right?
I know it is. Sorry, I'm just loading all the information for this one, and I will admit our applicants. Okay, appeal number 3189, 401 East State Street. Appeal of McKinley Development Companies on behalf of property owner GPA Management LLC for an area variance from section 325-8, column 9, maximum building height and feet requirements of the zoning ordinance. The applicant proposes to construct a new 7-story residential building on the property located at 401 East State Street. The project will also include multiple levels of structured parking that will serve the residents of the new building, as well as surrounding businesses and uses immediately adjacent to the site. Other components of the project include reconstruction of the 6 Mile Creek Trail within the limits of the site, including additional landscaping, seating, and pedestrian lighting. In order to accommodate increased height required for the structured parking decks, the applicant seeks a variance to construct a 71-foot building in the CBD 60 zone. The proposed building will exceed the 62-foot maximum height allowed under the zoning ordinance by 9 feet. The applicant also proposes to subdivide the existing parcel at 401 East State Street into 4 separate tax parcels. Area A measuring 0.112 acres with frontage along State Street, which will be conveyed to the city. Area B measuring 3,965 square feet to be conveyed to another party for construction of a memorial. Parcel C measuring 1.048 acres with approximately 182 feet of frontage on East Green and East State Streets and containing an existing 6-story commercial building, parking, and a portion of the Gateway Trail. In parcel D measuring 2.641 acres with approximately 184 feet of frontage on East State Street and to contain the new building, a portion of the Gateway Trail, and a fire access road. A cross-property easement will be required for vehicular access to ingress and egress on East State and Green Streets. The property is located in a CBD 60 use district in which the proposed uses are permitted. However, section 325-38 requires that an area variance be granted before the building permit is issued.
Okay, appellants, you have 5 minutes to present your case.
Thank you very much. So I'll get started. Megan, if you could check for Donnie Kim. Oh, you just let him in. Okay, thank you. Introduce myself. I'm Brian Bouchard with CHA, project engineer. Also, the team is with us today. James Trasher, principal engineer from my office. We have the developer, Jeff Githens, and the architectural team, Donnie Kim and Tim Fish from Cooper Carey. Megan provide a little bit of the background, and if I'm allowed to screen share, I have a couple figures that I'll show along the way. That's okay, I think I can, right? So just for context, this is 401 East State Street. It's at the intersection of East State Street, which is at the top of the page here, in Green Street. And as Megan mentioned, it's in the CBD 60 district. There are 2 existing buildings that will remain, the Gateway Commons and Gateway Center buildings with existing site access. And the portion of site that we are developing is the rear portion below the hillside, which currently exists as a large surface parking lot and an older 1-story building all the way in the rear with some additional parking. What we're proposing to construct, which is seen here, again, the existing Gateway buildings will remain. And in place of that large surface parking lot, we're proposing an apartment building, which is 7 stories. I believe there was some discussion about, the different floors and what the number of stories was, but it is 7 stories, and it will have residential apartments within the upper floors of the building, and will have a parking structure to provide for various parking on the lower floors, and included within the building is also different amenity spaces and exterior and interior courtyards for the residents and the area along the trail here. I want to just start by saying this isn't the beginning of the process. We have made our application to the planning board in September of last year. So we've been through nearly 9 months now of continuous meetings, engaging that planning board and all the various subcommittees to really refine and extract out of this project the most benefit that can be achieved from this site. It's taken so long truly because this is a very challenging site. We've been through many iterations to continuously improve the aesthetics of the building, both for mass and scale. We've worked on very specific areas within the site and providing a variety of public benefit and public amenities that will be created by this project, which are all very welcomed by the developer to support in the construction here. But that this truly is a unique site that you will not find anywhere else in the city within the CBD 60 district. There's a lot of complexities from access and the improvements that'll be made, the fire safety, and anybody that's going to develop this parcel within the CBD 60 guidelines. There's, as I mentioned, a lot of opportunities to provide public amenities on behalf of the developer. There's some existing easements and things that I'll explain, the public parking and topography. So our request here today within the CBD 60 district, which allows a maximum of 62 feet, is to allow for our building to be 71 feet for a variety of reasons. And they're basically lumped into categories that I'll go through very quickly and show you some images of what the building looks like contextually with its surrounding. But developable area is really the first justification for asking for this 9 feet of relief on our building. We all understand that the CBD 60 district does allow for 100% lot coverage. So just to be devil's advocate, we could make a sprawling footprint and make it slightly shorter to still accomplish what the code requires, but we would have the detriment of not being able to provide a variety of things within the site that we're not occupying by a building. And the first is that to our south, we are directly abutting the 6 Mile Creek, and previous improvements were made to the creek trail, but they basically stop halfway into that parking lot where there's a concrete Jersey barrier, and the improvements from the railing and the stone dust trail and landscaping were just stopped. And as part of this project and working with the various boards within the city, primarily the planning board and the review committees, is that this developer, as part of the project, is going to continue the look and aesthetic of that 6 Mile Creek trail all the way to the end of the site and continue it with stone dust off into the city-owned property that's off to the east. This includes a lot of improvements from continuing the pedestrian scale site lighting, the railing and capstones on that existing wall, and a lot of discussions that we've had and will continue to have at our upcoming meeting with the planning board regarding supplemental landscaping to make this creek walk trail an amenity to both this site and connecting us to downtown. But it does occupy space on the site. There's an existing easement that's 13 feet wide, and there's also a no build zone to respect that trail where we couldn't place the building. So that's one of the reasons why we're asking for the vertical height as opposed to the encumbrances that we have with easements and such across the site. We also have access. Anybody who develops this is going to have to provide access. We have a singular driveway with, well, we actually have 2 driveways with an escape lane adjacent to the Gateway Center, and we need to be able to safely provide access for both vehicles, pedestrians, and to accomplish the needs of emergency access and the aerial apparatus that we've worked ever since the very beginning sketches with Chief Parsons to ensure that he can address any issues that come about in terms of emergencies. But it does provide an area that is needed for the site that is otherwise not buildable. So first justification is the buildable area. Next is really a true benefit in us being able to provide for this project parking. We also understand that the CBD 60 district does not require any parking downtown. but with a few of the projects that we've been working downtown, Eric Hathaway and his group have taken a lot of studies and time to figure out the different parking stress on the existing parking structures that the city owns and spill over onto residential streets. So our intention is to provide parking, which is accomplished within a variety of garage levels underneath the building, so that it is screened, but still provides ample space not only for the residents of this project, but supplements that parking with the existing gateway tenants and residents and the office parking that exists there. And as part of this, with the planning board, we've arranged to have the tenants occupy the parking during business hours, and the developers agreed to provide those parking spaces, which are about 122 spaces for public use after business hours that can be managed to allow public parking downtown for people to park and access the commons and walk the creek walk, et cetera. So parking is very important to the project, but it does, again, occupy space vertically and is part of our request for the additional height within the building. The primary challenge on this site is truly topography. And if you've walked the site, you'll understand that, in the westerly half of the site, this building will be submerged within the hillside on the order of 10 to 12 feet, which is almost the full story and definitely captures the variance request that we have. But as you travel further east up State Street, the grade difference between State Street and the end of our building is nearly 70 feet. So the uniqueness of this site is really working to complement the topography of the area where we have a building that is, although 9 feet taller than the code requirement, blends into the hillside. This is a discussion really of the grade plane, which is what we are asking for, which is the height of the building, which is calculated by the grade plane. We have taken the grade plane around the perimeter of the building by code, which necessitates the 71-foot height in the variance. But you can imagine that if we were able to take the grade along State Street at the old property line, that this building in its current design that we're asking for your approval for the height variance for, the grade plane would be significantly different in its calculation and would be the same building, but would not require a variance. So there's a lot of complexity with the grading and how the grade plane is calculated that's causing us to design the building to match the topography in the surroundings, but also need the variance to accomplish what we're trying to do here. The grading is also so steep that you can see within the center of the building, and I'll show a picture of this, our first floor of full floor of residential units is actually the third residential floor, but there's only partial units on the first two. So this is actually the fourth floor of the building, and we're able to provide a pedestrian connection at grade with the sidewalk directly to one of our courtyards for those residents to walk to and from downtown and other businesses and actually walk into the first floor of the building. That's how drastic the grade change is on the site. And what we've done with architecture kind of shows you this. This is the north elevation view from State Street. And you can see, although we are a 7-story building asking for 71 feet of height, you can see the white shadows adjacent to us. And this is a view, again, looking if you're on the sidewalk from East State Street and the existing buildings that are off to the east. Our building, although it's 7 stories, perceives itself to be 2.5 to 3 stories, which almost matches the building elevation along State Street on the east. And then against the Gateway Center building is almost nearly identical. We had the surveyor measure their exposed height, and I'm not sure exactly what the grade plane is for their building, but from their parking lot to the top of the building is 68 feet, which is basically what we're asking for with a 71 foot tall building. But the reason for this is to show that it is very much consistent with the streetscape, and that we're providing, as I said, this gateway, pedestrian connection directly from the sidewalk to that first full floor plate of residential units into our courtyard. This again shows we were able to provide photo simulations. So we took photos and actually inserted in our building for this. So there's a couple views. Again, this is the site with the creek. East State Street is on the north. This is the view in our comparison to the existing building, which is Gateway Commons. and the building that we're constructing along the creek side. So very much in line with that grade plane that the roof line creates. And then again, the Gateway Center building, a view looking up State Street from the tuning fork, which this is our superimposed photo simulation building, pardon the crane, because that's the city's construction traffic that's happening there. But you can see where our roof line actually is set behind this other structure that's off to the east and is very much in line with it, even though from the creek side, it perceives itself to be a much taller building. We have one last view, which is looking down State Street toward the tuning fork. And again, you know, the roof lines matching and kind of blending into what is the taller building that's down at the Gateway Center. So in summary, there's a lot of challenges here, and we have spent a lot of time on architecture with the aesthetics of the building and done different things to break up that facade and provide various courtyard levels that actually break that building into pieces and make it look like individual buildings that have been constructed, along with a multitude of public amenities that we're willing to provide with the various site constraints that we have. And in terms of the standards that we have to weigh this variance against, we feel it should be approved in terms of, you know, the character of the area, which I just went through, that the building is perceived to be actually smaller than what we're calculating and needing to calculate for the code compliant grade plane, whether it could be achieved by some other method. You know, if you get into deleting a story of the parking, you know, we would be compliant, but it would not provide the same benefit that can be achieved by that method. So the benefit of what we're providing certainly outweighs any detriment to the surroundings. Whether it's substantial, again, we feel like we're matching the heights for the Gateway Commons building, which is very similar in height, including its little tower that it has. And you know, that the 9 feet is not substantial for the reasons that we gave to you this evening and within our application paperwork. Whether there's an adverse environmental impact, that answer is no. Obviously, the board, I believe, has in their possession the negative seeker determination, which outlined that there are no significant adverse impacts as it relates to this project, which was part of the planning board's review at their last meeting. And whether the hardship is self-created, which is, again, a matter that it's not self-created because of the complexities that this site contains and the uniqueness of those complexities that you really won't find anywhere else within the CBD 60 district in terms of the context of the site, the creek walk, the public amenities, and the massive topography change that make this site challenging to develop, but that we're willing to do in a way that we feel blends in with the surroundings and provides a lot of benefit. So asking for your approval on the height variance, and I will turn it back over to the board for any questions or comments that the rest of the design team can also weigh in on if you have any feedback for us.
Great, thank you. Stephen and David, do you have any questions?
Total width and length of the building, and then total total square footage of relief sought.
Gross square foot or building footprint?
Gross and building footprint.
Building footprint I should have offhand, which is about 63,000 or 64,000 square feet on the footprint. Okay. Donnie or Tim, I'm not sure if you have the gross data for the entire building envelope listed on your plans, if you could help me.
Sure, give me just 30 seconds.
I'm trying to figure out the size of the relief sought amortized over the 9 feet.
Yeah, I mean, definitely specific to height, you know, we can determine that we're asking for 9 feet on 62 feet, right? So the building footprint itself plays into that with some of the reasoning that I gave, but the percentage of the height relief, you know, would be 9 feet on the order of the 71 feet, which is about 12%.
And And then you mentioned 122 spaces that are offered to the public after business hours.
Correct, yeah. So we have a total of 267 spaces in the garage. Some of them will be key carded access to the residents, just specific for the new tenants, the new apartment tenants. We are purchasing this property from the existing owners, and as part of that, they do have their existing surface parking. So there'll be 30 spaces for the gateway residents, and those 122 spaces will be used by the business tenants during the day, and would transition to access via mobile app for public patrons to use during the off-peak hours and on weekends.
But as a contingency to the purchase offer, 152 spots are conveyed to the seller in perpetuity.
Correct, yep.
We have 415,000 square feet, roughly 414,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, and part of the parking discussion too was to ensure that this is the CBD 60 district, to promote, walkability to the downtown businesses for employment and otherwise. We did work with the planning board. We had a heavier parking count on part of the building before, and listened to some of their comments to try and reduce that, similar to what the parking counts are, for instance, at some of the other newly developed projects, whether it be down on the Green Street garage projects or the city center project, and trying to compare ourselves more with their parking counts so that we don't have an excess of parking that's, taking up a portion of this site as well. So we did listen to their comments on that and have ended up at the 267 that are in the garage now.
I have a question on that note, just about the public parking. Can anybody here speak to an analysis of demand for public parking in this location, like a little bit off the beaten path for the Commons and the restaurant row there, but is there currently an unmet demand for parking in the evening hours at that location?
I know that we provided our parking relationship to, Eric and the transportation group, and I know that they have been studying some of the adjacent garages for their use. Obviously, the displacement of some parking on the Green Street garage, and the impacts of businesses. I think it was difficult for him to really put his pen to paper within the last year as part of those efforts, just because not as many people were traveling and commuting as in prior years. So I know that the city is definitely looking at the overall downtown district and what parking would be required, but our direction was to try and provide a way where some of these spaces could be used during those off hours to further relieve some of the stress on those parking areas, even for visitors and guests and things like that, to the tenants and people that wanted to walk downtown. So there will be a way to sign the site to make it known that there's available parking, and the mobile apps help to do that as well. But again, that's just items that we've addressed along the way based on feedback from the city transportation staff and the planning board as we've gone through the process. So,
is this paid parking for the public after hours?
yes, it would be like similar to one of your apps where you pull in. There's designated spots within the parking garage that you can park at, and you get your time limit, and would be able to control the space that way for hourly rates that are comparable to the downtown garages as well.
So parking's going to be $1 an hour at this location?
I don't think we've established what the actual fees would be yet, just that there will be a way to provide the public another place to park. I don't think the intent is to make it more expensive than any of the other city garages, because it would be public parking. So I think that's the intent, is to make it comparable.
Yeah, and I could add to that, Brian. That is the intent. The fee is meant as a governor, so that spaces are not overused, or cars are left there, and then you have a nuisance the next morning as the office tenants return. So it's a good way just to manage use of the spaces. It's not necessarily a high revenue generator, it's a control mechanism.
But it'd be your firm administering the payments and compensation for the parking?
Correct. Yep.
Would this project be unprofitable if we didn't grant the 9 feet variance?
Yes.
It would be, yeah. And I'll just describe it to you a different way. Stephen, you have two buildings essentially, although they're conjoined, the east wing and the west wing. And between those two buildings, you've got the west wing that has got 4 residential levels, and then the east wing that's got 6 residential levels for most of the building. So on average, you've got a 5-story building here. So if we provided no parking, which is not practical, we would still achieve our residential 5 levels in density, and probably would find a way to, underwrite the project. Because we have to provide parking for Gateway Center. The 152 spaces that we're providing is a direct replacement of their current surface spaces that we're building upon. And they use those. I mean, those are part of their office leases, part of their retail leases, and residential leases. So those have, already users who have an expectation of those spaces. And then we added spaces, another 115 for our own residents at a ratio, very comparable to some of the other multifamily properties in downtown Ithaca. So in order to achieve the residential density with the parking that we have to provide practically, you don't have to provide it by code, we had to have the variance to maintain the residential density. The other challenge is, even if we had the 5-story condition and no parking, there are at least 3 levels of residential on the west wing that would be on the north side, almost uninhabitable. I mean, it'd be habitable, but you'd be looking right out of a window to a retaining wall that's being built by the city now. It's not an ideal condition. Or on the east wing, you're looking right into the slope of a steep grade. And so even if we didn't have the parking needs that we have, we would still want to get this building up in elevation before we start our residential levels, just because of the unique circumstance that we're in, kind of being down in a hole down, well below State Street. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but yes, this would be a challenge project without the additional 9 feet with the parking that we're providing.
I thank you for that. Your last comment there was what I was going to question on too, that like, let's just say, so you have to add the parking, you have to have the parking because of the responsibilities to Gateway Center and to better lease your apartments to, tenants who have cars. But, so one way of doing that would be it'd be more expensive, but submerge that 9 feet, right? You could have your parking on a semi-basement level. It'd be expensive and probably complicated in that area, and get the whole building, all the floors you want to do underneath the height limit. But it seems like more importantly is if you did what I said, which would be more expensive, or you got rid of the parking altogether, that you would have half of your building looking at a wall, right? I mean, that
right.
seems to be the half of like all the building, right?
A marketability issue or a habitability issue?
Well, I mean, so it's not you can have light and vent, and right, and you can have egress out of those. You can figure out a way to do that, but it would be more a leasability, right? Of leasing those apartments that don't have practical light. What direction is that?
And some of them,
and you're looking at a wall. Yeah.
right. No, I think that's very well described. And you can't see my cursor, but Brian, if you could just move from kind of left to right along the north side of the building, you would have some conditions of potential lack of daylight if you had residential units at grade on the north side, given the proximity to the city retaining wall, and then we're building another retaining wall in between that and the building in some areas. So you can't build an apartment unit without natural light. So even though you could, you could occupy those, you wouldn't be code compliant without.
Well, how far are they from the retaining wall? How far is that where the building is?
It really varies. This is the city's retaining wall, and we need to provide a certain amount of respect so that we don't impact their new construction. And our site wall, because it is a parking garage, will be basically directly adjacent to the building. So this wing of the building may not be feasible for egress if those were proper residential units on those submerged floors, which are currently scheduled for parking garage. On this side, there's about 6 feet between the unit itself and the retaining wall. And again, if you dropped that and submerged it, you would be looking quite literally at a retaining wall, out your window, which we probably could provide egress from, but it would be difficult to provide the, what you would want for like a habitable space in those apartments, and would be definitely to the detriment of the project.
Well, I said half of the units, but that's actually, thinking back to your elevation that you have, that's not exactly true, because it would be quite a bit of the building is above that problematic area, right? What I mean, part of could you go to that?
It is, right, it is now, because the real advantage of having
because of the
parking
height.
below is it raises the elevation of the first residential level to get out of the hole. If you had to drop that though, then you would barely see the top of this building from State Street. In many sections and several sections, it would be below the elevation of State Street.
Well, wait, I
Yeah.
don't understand that, because wouldn't the whole building just be 9 feet down?
No, you would drop 3 levels of parking. If what I said was true, where you had no parking and you just dropped the whole building down to grade.
Well, let's
Then
not
you-
say that, because you don't need to do that. I mean, I've been thinking of for our criteria here for getting the whole building beneath the height limit, you would have to lose like one level of
One
parking.
floor.
We'd
Yeah.
lose 1 level of parking. That's right.
And you would still satisfy the terms of your private contract, correct?
No, because that 1 level of parking would be substantial within our plans for the scheduled parking that we have.
So you would lose units then.
Yeah, the whole project would fall apart, right? Because without the parking, we would lose units, and without the units, we would lose the financial status of the project, because, Jeff didn't mention it, but the construction of this building is significantly different than if you had a flat site, right? There's a lot of money being spent to ensure the retaining walls that the city's constructed, and with what we're doing to build the building the way that we've constructed it. And as you guys know, bedrock is a varying thing throughout the city, and there's various construction types of the foundation just within this footprint. So, I mean, there are economics at play too. I just don't want to lose focus on what we're requesting, which is for the height, and what you've tried to vet through, which is what are the impacts if we didn't have that extra 9 feet? And the answer is either losing units and not building the project, or losing parking and not losing the project. And what we have tried to outline is the support that this is really more of a calculation of how the grade plane works than what our perceived height is. We're not asking for 9 feet that's above a very level and typical street. It's 9 feet that truly does blend into its surroundings. Even on this side where you have a 3-story building, we're not any taller than that, just because of the uniqueness of the site. So, but definitely losing either parking or units doesn't make the project whole.
Can you explain to me the correlation, why you would have to lose units if you were to deplete parking?
Brian, it might be worth showing the site sections if you have those.
David, I think what he was meaning with that is that if let's just say you have to keep all the parking that they've designed, then the only way to get under the height limit would be to lop off a floor of units. So
Yes,
it's
okay. All right.
that's with the given that all that parking is necessary.
Right. Yeah. And as I said, we did scale back the parking that we're providing at the request of the board. It still is within a ratio that's comparable to us being adjacent to the downtown districts and business districts. But peeling that parking away even more would, be a detriment to the project, as would removing a whole floor of units. So they're basically hand in hand, if that makes sense.
conceivably though, through the zoning where it requires no parking, and of your parking in this project, 57% is allocated to the seller in perpetuity. Here's what I'm trying to say here. You could reduce parking though.
Yes, yes, we could, in a reading of the code, yes, there's a few things that we could do. We could either maximize our lot coverage, but there would be severe impacts to doing that, right? We would lose fire access, which would make the project not viable. We would lose creek walk amenity trails, which would make the project not viable. So there are things to say that we could do to reduce the height of the building. And one is expanding the lot coverage, which is also allowed. The other one that you've pointed out is parking. Parking is not required on this project, but it is required to make the project viable and not have any further impacts. So one of the tests that we need to weigh for our standards of proof is, is the height variance more impactful than simply not providing parking for the residents or at a reduced parking count, which in our case, if we reduced one floor of parking, would essentially leave the new residents of the apartments with no parking and would backpedal on what we have worked with the transportation group at the city and Eric's office, as well as the New York State DOT over the last 3 months, to provide them all the data that's needed for them to agree that there won't be any significant traffic impacts. So I guess I understand what your question was, which is we could reduce parking, but our statement to that question is that there is a greater impact to further reducing parking than there is for what we're minimizing our variance request for, which is the 9 feet of extra height, if that makes sense.
And it's all interwoven, right? Because I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard to separate these things, because then also what you get for those 2 layers of parking, 2 levels of parking, is those units not up against the retaining wall.
Right. So yeah,
Correct.
again, you weigh it where there's significantly worse impacts to those outcomes than there would be for the minimalization of a height variance, right?
I have a question for you. So could you go back to a site plan? So you have easements, and you have the fire truck access that has to be a certain width. You've worked through that, all that.
Yes.
I guess, what is the width of the building? Because I mean, let's just say one way you could ameliorate that is, so you have to have all the stuff along the creek that you said you were going to have, and then you have the retaining wall. So let's just say you're trying to think of an alternative to stay under the height, but get those units away from the.
So
So what's that width?
Yeah, so I understand the width is very much based on the required parking as well, right? They're all interwoven, just like we said. So to peel away even 3 or 4 feet of this building renders multiple floors of the parking garage useless, or not useless, but we would be deleting an entire row. So the width of the building, as you can see here, is parking space, minimal drive aisle, parking,
Right.
parking, drive aisle. We've even included in some of the areas where we've provided relief to the building, parallel parking spaces, compact car and electric car parking spaces that are smaller. So reducing the width of the building would also delete a significant amount of parking, which we understand now has a significant greater impact than the perceived height of the building with the justifications that we've gave. But that's a good comment. The building width is very much based on.
So
the
is that
available
about
parking.
120 feet right there?
120 feet, that's correct.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's
Exactly.
actually quite wide up above on your residential floors, right? I mean,
It's-
I know you've got columns and structure running
Right.
through all this,
Yeah.
but,
So we've
yeah.
used that width to be able to get creative with some of the outdoor spaces. So you can see this is not a straight corridor that's double loaded, which would normally be like 80 feet. So we have courtyard space on each one of these legs of the journey here. We have this courtyard that you approach when you come from State Street to that 4th level of the building for pedestrian access. And then the hallway actually snakes back and forth in order to get the unit count that we need and provide those outdoor amenities. So this is the area that's above the concrete podium of the parking deck, where we're able to manipulate the units to fit and still provide all of those patio areas within the building as well.
That's
that
a
help?
pretty, I see what you have to do. That's pretty inefficient floor plan as far as double loaded quarters go. Yeah, but I think the other thing that rolls into this is the planning board, I think it was asking you to break down the massing of the building so that it looks like maybe an assemblage of like warehouse buildings rather than
Yeah, very
one
much
big,
so.
long-
Yeah, we spent a great deal of time with them, and you can see, you know, the State Street frontage, how there's almost different colors and variations to the building with these breaks, these very large breaks that form our courtyard. And that was direct input from them, you know, and same with the Creek Walk side, where there's different materials that perceive different heights, and there's these appendages that break in and out. There's vertical elements to the building that we've added and changes of materials that we've added, all culminating in their determination at the last meeting that, you know, the mass and scale of this building based on their seeker determination has no adverse impacts to the surroundings. So definitely worked a lot of time on architecture with the design review board for sure.
So going back to something you said earlier, you couldn't cover the full lot with the building because you have to have a fire lane. So that was incorrect.
Well,
And
yeah,
the
I
fire
just want to
department
correct
also
that.
gave you a 6 foot. They allowed you to come in 6 feet from the required 26 feet. So
Okay.
that's,
Yep.
you know, 15 feet throughout your entire building that you're really asking for.
Yeah, so just a correction. My statement is that yes, in the CBD 60 district, 100% lot coverage is typically allowed. So in any other place where you do have proper fire access off of a street and other things, that you would be able to cover the entire site with 100%. But because of our specific and unique site constraints that you've that you've heard and that you just mentioned, is that yes, we do have a portion of the site that requires fire access, which limits us in our ability to fully cover the site. So that was definitely the justification for needing to provide fire access that both this building and any other building that might be proposed on the site would. And to answer your comment on the 26 feet, this was something where we actually changed to a more, a different, and Tim and Donnie can correct me if I'm wrong, but we changed to a different construction type so that we could build probably, you know, a more expensive building, but we could provide that additional 6 feet for a greater separation of landscaping between both the building and the creek walk. So we did take the chief's comments and change the actual construction type of the building to allow for the 20 foot fire access road, which does still require some pull-offs for that aerial apparatus, which you can see here, to accomplish the goals of the planning board, which in that respect was specific for landscaping, to provide more landscaping up against the building. And that extra 6 feet definitely did help to do that, along with the plantings along the building to break up the facade. So, yep, definitely following along with the planning board comments there.
And my primary concern isn't the street, the State Street frontage. It's the creek walk frontage, that 70 feet. Because you're what, 22 feet probably from the building if you're on the creek walk?
Yeah, it's probably 30 feet, 42 feet. Yep, 42 feet.
Okay, so that's
Creek
much
walk
larger than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, the creek walk itself is like an 8-foot stone dust trail. And then we have an area that, because of the reduction in the fire access lane, we're able to provide between some places it's 6 to 8 feet of landscaping, and then that 20-foot lane. And then there's 5-foot sidewalk and probably 3 or 4 feet of landscaping up against the building too. So yeah, it's over 40 feet of separation there for sure. Yep.
I think, Stephen, you make a really great point. What I read into what you said is that though when you're down there, I mean, point taken on East State Street, yeah, the building's partially buried, but you get the full effect of the height of that building down along the trail. I mean, that's where it's a big building there.
Yeah, you do. And that was, you know, where we started with more of a blank canvas and started to actually develop the relief of the building, both, you know, the courtyards and also vertically. You can see the building materials have changed significantly from that 5th floor to the 7th floor, and even across the building where you end up with some of these Juliet balconies and other things where there's things that break up the massing. And those were very pointed comments that we took back from the early meetings with the design review committee and the planning board to get their input on the overall impact of what the height is, both from State Street and from along the creek walk. So.
So you're not through the planning and approval stages yet, but in watching this project come to fruition, one of the turning points, as I saw it among board members, was when the 122 spots came into play. But in the event that you had to downsize your parking for residents and still provide the parking for the seller, the planning board could still determine that in order to get your approvals that you'll provide that parking, albeit paid parking, you would still be providing that service. Is that correct? For should you fail to get your variance the other day and you
I think if I'm reading the question correctly, I think if I'm understanding correctly, further reducing parking, would the planning board agree to it? I think the answer is no.
That wasn't my question. My question was, the planning board would still be in a position, no matter what, to grant their approval based on you providing 122 spots.
No. In fact, we would go significantly backwards on the project, right? Leading up to this meeting, it's our requirement to provide the planning board's referral to you. And as part of that was the last meeting was the seeker determination. We couldn't present this project to you without understanding that the planning board is at a point where they feel there are no adverse environmental impacts based on this project. So we have worked with them to find a parking mix that satisfies the need for the new residents, the existing businesses, and the public parking. And if part of that is reduced, it would start that process all over again and potentially may not be supported by the planning board, because in that case, they may feel that there's more units than could be supported based on our parking ratio. And we provided them with examples of the parking, within city center and what their ratios are to get to the point where we're at. And I feel like if we reduce that more, if that's the question, that there would likely be, as I've explained before, a greater impact to parking generally throughout the downtown area than there would be with the request that we're making for the additional height to accomplish the parking needs of the project. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'll add to Brian's comment. And I was looking up some numbers as he was speaking. And there's two considerations here. One is from the planning board's perspective, the parking for residents is a relevant consideration. We are parking at 115 spaces. We're at a ratio of 22% of all residents would have a parking space on site. And what we did to justify that ratio, which is on the lower end of ratios of projects of this scale, was to look at the other existing multifamily properties in and around us in downtown. And I'm just going to cite one because I have that data right in front of me. But City Center is parked at a slightly higher ratio, and I just found the number. They are 70 spaces for 231 residents, or 30%. So we went to the lowest possible ratio that we were comfortable with as a developer in what we think we needed to lease the apartments. And I think the lowest possible ratio that planning board saw is reasonable. Yes, we're walkable, and yes, we have TCAT around us, and there are other factors, and that's what helps us get comfortable with the lower ratio. But if we did not have that ratio of parking for residents, A, I don't think we would get the support of planning board, and B, we would be very challenged as a developer and operator to feel comfortable about this project.
Okay, let's, I think we've had a pretty robust question and answer period. Let's move on to Megan. Do we have anybody speaking supporting or against?
I have one letter, but I did want to just add one thing about the question that David just asked, meaning like what would happen with say it's not even this project, but any project where the planning board's reviewed something, completed their environmental review, it does not, well, we hope by the time it gets to this point, it's something the board is open to considering. If it's not something that the board can approve, they're not locked into approving it. At that point, they would have to go back to the board. And they, as Brian mentioned, they would need to reopen seeker and then ultimately do seeker on the project that either meets zoning or is approved by the BZA. So it's, I think that's what I heard David asking. We have no one here to speak in person. We did receive one letter of support from the Downtown Ithaca Alliance. And that is from Gary Ferguson, the executive director. I write on behalf of the Downtown Ithaca Alliance to express our support for the proposed zoning appeal for the new construction building on the Gateway parcel at 401 East State Street. This project, being developed by McKinley Development, is requesting a height variance for the proposed new building. Supporting this variance is based on several factors. The request is small relative to the overall project. The proposed building has been designed to include its own parking decked on the lower levels of the building. This saves space on the site, but also helps drive the need for additional height. The proposed building sits in the gorge, replacing an existing one-story building. The topography of the site enables the new construction to visually fit into the landscape. The height of the new building is similar to the existing and neighboring Gateway Plaza building. The street views of the new building are well within the character of the existing neighborhood. In addition to these factors, it is also important to note that this project will assist the downtown and the immediate area in several important ways. It will provide badly needed additional parking for the area. Roughly half of the parking spaces will be available to the public and other businesses after normal work hours. The location has been identified by the 2020 Downtown Strategic Plan as a site suitable and appropriate for redevelopment, particularly for housing. The project is being carefully coordinated with the Gateway Plaza and Commons buildings, as well as the ongoing Route 79 bank stabilization project. The project will also expand the build out of the 6 Mile Creek Trail walkway for public benefits. For reasons we support this proposed request for a variance. As a reminder, the Downtown Ithaca Alliance is a business improvement district that represents the property owners, businesses, and residents of downtown Ithaca.
Okay, great. So
We did
now
receive
let's,
from the county to Suzanne that they did review it and they do not have any comments or recommendations on the project. And we also have the planning board's comment, we'll call it, not a recommendation. It's more of a comment this time. The board does not identify any long-term planning issues with this. Oh, I'm sorry, it is a recommendation and supports this appeal. The planning board has worked with the applicant over many months, including going through the design review process to refine the design and minimize the perceived mass and height. This is documented in the FEAF Part 3 narrative, particularly in the sections pertaining to impacts to aesthetic resources and impact to historic resources. The board balanced some of the following factors. Architectural changes made by the applicant reduce the mass and scale of the building, including changing the building construction type so the width of the fire lane could be reduced from 26 feet to 20 feet and adding additional green space. Adding a terraced planting area on the face of the retaining wall at the south end of the site, facade modulation of the south elevation / creek side, reducing the height of the parapet and changing material colors and application on the north elevation or State Street side. The topography minimizes the look of the building from the public way. The width of the building is dictated by the dimensional requirements of the internal parking decks, meaning there is little flexibility to make the building narrower. The parking program has benefits to the general public as it is preferable to surface parking, increases the parking supply in the downtown core without city investment, and potentially relieves pressure from the existing city-owned downtown garages. The applicant has worked with the fire chief to devise a layout that allows for trees and other landscaping to be planted along the front of the building, as well as a 5-foot planting strip between the road and trail. Although 5 feet is not ideal, structural soil will be used to provide adequate soil volumes for successful growth. The road also incorporates areas of stamped concrete for variation and interest to create a plaza-like feeling. The enhanced public access and trail into city property is a great benefit to the community.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, so we'll close what do we call it, Megan? The public hearing. Yeah, okay. And now start deliberating. I guess so we can be as efficient as possible. There are only 3 of us here tonight, which means that it has to be unanimous to pass this. Before we start talking about it, I guess I want to get a sense from Stephen and David. If either of you are very negative, then we should consider that now.
I would say that I'm not very positive about it, but
However you want to proceed with the discussion amongst us, but I'm with Stephen on this. I have concerns. So that's really a question to the applicants, how they want to proceed.
Is there additional information that the applicants might provide that would help you make your decision? Not that I'm trying to sway you. I'm just asking if you have all of the information you feel you need to make the decision.
I think, to just give you a sense of where I stand, I look at this, that the applicants were able to design a building of this scale speaks to the leniency of the zoning as it is. And it seems to me that, yes, there's some the topography of the site, and there are building restraints. I understand that, but to me, the biggest need for them to go up in height is the nature of their contract with the seller and that relationship that drove them in a direction. To me, that's a private agreement. That
David, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
The 57% of their parking has to be allocated to the seller, so they're compensating for that. When really that doesn't reflect. They have their property rights, and they're asking to go beyond that as a relation to this contract, is how I see it. And then if I'm just going through the motion form, let's see here, what gives me pause.
But David, okay, go ahead.
Let's see here. I see number 2, 3, and 5 as being an inhibitor to voting in favor. That's
okay. I guess I just want to comment on that. How you phrased it with the negotiation with the seller and all that isn't the way that I was thinking about it. But I think also that it's hard to separate out the parking. So how many spots was it again? I forgot that they have to have, and then the marketing of the units, all that. But I think that that site and it's next to the retaining wall and how you might design your way out of that, even if the parking wasn't an issue. I think parking is a benefit to them because it lifts the building up and it gets it away from the retaining wall. So I think all those things, I mean, like if the parking wasn't an issue at all, I think they'd still need to get that building up.
You think that from a design perspective?
I think from a design perspective, because the building's in a hole, I mean, so you have half of the units are, okay, so the south facing units are all really nice, right? Then they're all looking at the water, and it's peaceful on that side. On the other side, it's essentially like an urban condition where you have the back of a building right up next to the units. I mean, can you lose like one line of parking and make that 120 feet a little skinnier and do, mess around with the floor plan to move it away a little bit? I mean, you probably could, maybe you lose some units here or there, designing the building so you're moving it away from the retaining wall, but still some of those units are still going to they're down in a hole. So yeah. Yeah.
That's their purview, that's their, that's their design process. That's their their risk tolerance, except that's how I view that. And then just as it pertains to what this board has purview over with the
Yeah.
five criteria, I don't think that they meet the criteria. Right. I think they have three strikes against. To me, that would sway me in the direction.
Okay. So you said 2, 3, and 5?
Let me double check here.
I know you said 2 and 5. I can't remember the one.
Correct.
So whether there's a feasible alternative to, so what would you say the feasible alternative would be?
I guess if to speak to Megan's comment, that might be the missing information, right? I know for their sake, they're saying that there is no feasible alternative. But I think that there's a way to design a structure here that meets the zoning and allows them to utilize their property to the fullest extent of their rights without a variance. Stephen?
And then, okay, and then 5, I mean, what is the difficulty self-created? I mean, it's usually always that way, right? I mean, just because that's checked no doesn't mean this whole thing falls apart, because our appeals are usually always self-created, right? They could just not do the building. I mean, that's yeah, okay. And then the other one, whether it's substantial, is that your other one? Because it's 12% of the height. I think I remember that correctly.
An aggregate of the total, because of the width and the length of the building is so long and large. I view it.
Oh, I see how you're getting that. So the 9 times the whole floor.
Yeah.
Like volume. Okay. What are you thinking, Stephen?
I think David said a lot of it. Again, the creek side and the 6 Mile Creek natural area at the end. The 71-foot building right there in that area is just not, and it works for the Gateway Center building because there's 80 or 90 feet of separation between the creek trail itself and the building that's that height. So, I might be, a condition I would probably vote for would be the 9 feet on the State Street side of it, and then on the half side, or the half facing the creek, reducing that down to 60 feet, or the 62 that's required by a zone. That's a condition that I would be happy to vote for. But the full size of the building at 71 feet is just not. That's a non-issue for me. Like I'm not. That's a non-starter for me in terms of the building itself.
Okay, so if we voted right now, this wouldn't pass. So what, it seems like, so what, Megan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so it sounds to me like maybe there's a couple things. So I guess that's up to the applicant at this point. So the board has suggested a couple things to look into, is to find out whether they're feasible alternatives, which Stephen just suggested about the full height, and also David asked about any other feasible alternatives that would and to make this building zoning compliant. So you can take some time and address those issues and come back. Or if you don't want to do any, if you don't feel that you need to do any more digging or analysis on this topic, then the board can vote tonight. I guess the question is up to you, is whether you feel you have more information you could provide to the board to help them with this decision.
And I guess before that, I don't want to make it this as efficient as possible. So David and Stephen, what would you like to see, or what would you like them to do to potentially move this vote in favor? I mean, I guess I'm not saying you should. Let me rephrase that. If we're going to vote now, it's going to be negative. If we want to salvage the project, what would you like to see to help you, if anything, reconsider it?
I think that, I think this property is located in some of the most favorable zoning in the city and the county, and I would like to see a project adhere to the full extent of rights by zoning.
So wait, are you saying then that the height limit to figure out since the zoning is fairly favorable, yeah, to figure out how to use the generous height limitation that's by right?
That's would be my advice. I guess to the applicants, our board is usually 5 members. We have 4 members currently, of which 3 are present. So how you proceed with the revisions to this project, knowing that that's the current makeup of the board and that's the metrics you would have to, to whip the votes to, essentially. That's up to you guys. But I would lean toward a project that really adheres to the zoning in the C60 zone. And if you come back with a 1 foot, 2 foot, that's a much different conversation, I guess. But that's what I would like to see as a member.
Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I fully understand exactly what David said. Right, on a more typical site, that this zoning district, even all the way up, right, all the central business districts are favorable, but you have taken out of context the long list of unique pieces of this site that constrain us, which was the very body of our application. And is this board's, we wouldn't be here, I guess, if we could have complied with zoning. So, I mean, that's the board's, that's why this board was created, was to look at the favorable zoning within this district and to hear our case, to appeal what is the only requirement of this project of this size, which is the height, based on a variety of reasons that we've explained to you in order to justify it, which sounded strikingly similar to all the things that we've spent 9 months with the planning board on, and they wrote their recommendation to you on all the reasons why we've been through this iterative process. So I'm still at a loss to see what we could do more prior to the next meeting, aside from the long list of work that we've put in for the last 9 months, and just reiterate that to a couple different board members. And I don't want to necessarily do that if we have to. I think if there's something that's more pointed that we can address, other than going back and adhering to the zoning, just is there 1 or 2 of these things that you feel like aren't achievable and we can respond to them? And in the end, I guess if we postpone, we have to postpone just because of the lack of board members. But I feel like if we do postpone, there should be something more that we're tasked with to come back to answer the questions. Otherwise, we've given our testimony and we've given our justification for the standards of proof, which are all in line with the other various bodies that we visited along the way. So I feel like we're being very brief in an hour presentation on a project that's taken 9 months to get to this point, right?
Yeah, David, I mean, back to our deliberations here. David, I think that's why we're here, is to offer relief when there are, unusual circumstances. And I mean, in my view, this site has such unusual circumstances in that if we're thinking about the impact of this extra 9 feet in height on East State Street, I think there's ample reason to think that the 9 feet is not such an imposition on East State, given the unique topography of the site. Now, I take Stephen walks his dog down there along Susan Creek, and I see that from the creek side that you're going to get the full force of that height, and it's going to be an extra tall building, as you said, in an already fairly generous zoning district. Stephen, so am I understanding this, David, that there's really, other than coming back with a design that adheres to the zoning, that is there anything they could do? And then I have the same question for you, Stephen, of like, then what would you like to see to help you, reconsider? Because if there's nothing, then there's no, I mean, I suppose that the appellants could withdraw and come back hoping that if there are two more board members, that this might go differently. Or we vote right now. I mean, Stephen, let me know, and David too, what, and I suppose just for efficiency, let's be specific as to what the appellants could bring back next time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 71 feet facing the creek side. I mean, the state street frontage wouldn't be an impact in my view, but the creek side of the 71 feet just seems significant to my mind. So if you could do half of the top floor and still make it work, I would love to see that. Yeah, I mean, that's the compromise between granting it and making it the 62 feet that David suggested. And
Stephen, were you saying the by half, you mean the side, the close side, I guess it's the west side of the building that's closest to downtown?
The creek side specifically.
Well, like the whole, so you mean like the creek side would have a step back so that it'd be taller on?
I think though, Stephen, because the massing has been broken down along both sides, so East State Street and the creek side, I think, I don't remember if I saw a section or not, but there is I guess I'm not so clear if those upper stories do step back along the creek anywhere. I mean, do they? I know that the building steps back, so it's not one, it's not one monolith along the creek side, it steps back. But is it true that in some cases, I know we were looking at the elevation and you were talking about how the materials change on those upper floors. Mm-hmm. Does it also step back somewhere?
Hey, Tim Fish, before you answer, there is two Gateway Center buildings. You have the main building that sits back, and then there's another building that sits about 20 feet or less off the creek. So if you're walking in, you have creek walk, drive aisle building. So I believe that building is 68 feet in height as well. So this is just a Stevens comment on 71 feet. You currently have a building that will be in closer proximity to the creek that is also taller than the 62-foot height. But
right.
Tim,
I'm familiar with that building, and I'm not a fan of that building. The center with the clock tower being, 80 feet off the creek walk makes that much more appealing in my mind as a pedestrian that frequently uses that area.
Okay.
So, hey, James, I was going to add to your comment. We've done a creek walk study throughout all of Ithaca, and there are several other examples other than the Gateway Commons apartment building being much closer to the creek walk in a comparable height. And I don't know, Stephen, if it's worth sending you, those photos if that helps you. But there's several examples as you go towards really the west or southwest, let's call it, along the creek walk, where you're right up against, either a 7-story parking garage or 7-story building. And, so it's not completely without precedent is my point.
Right. And the other thing I was going to add, Stephen, is all those insets within the building were intended to, to reduce the kind of apparent height from the creek walk side just because of the way they're set back. And there is a terraced kind of courtyard or roof between the east and west wings that actually is a floor lower than the
Tim, I think it would be worthwhile for you to pull up the floor plan for the top level to make sure that that's clear to everyone.
Sure.
Is there a section through there too? That could be helpful.
Yeah, I think there was a series of sections. I don't know, Donnie, if you can pull those up, or Brian, but the sections that we showed before, and we can show the upper floor as well. So there you go. So you can see right between the east and west wings there, that green space on the creek side, that is basically a floor lower, right at the angle between the two buildings. That one right, yeah, that right there.
So
On the
is
upper
it
floor.
true? Is it true that what we're seeing, the tallest parts of the building that supersede or that go above the zoning limit are what we're seeing the units here, right? So
That's
the
correct.
purple and the green on the left side.
Right.
The
Correct.
rest of it
But
is-
again, you can see the insets that, again, is going to, create these kind of shadows between the buildings. And, as you look up, perspective will make them recede a little bit in height.
And just for context, Stephen, I mean, that was a big part of the 9 months that we spent with planning board was doing just this in response to, a very similar perspective as yours. And we studied this many different ways to arrive at where we are today in an arrangement and setback and modulation that was, acceptable to them. So, there's been other comments similar that we have, addressed in this latest design.
Yeah,
Again,
and
I was going to say that architecturally, the upper level does have a different treatment. Again, all intended to, kind of modulate and scale down the appearance of the building. So you can see the upper level, all along it. And again, we try to provide variety between those projecting elements and the insets. So it's really kind of broken down, consistent with the scale of the tuning fork area.
So on the upper floor here, we see where it's rendered in a
Right,
white.
it's in shadow. Yeah, that's right. Again, just to break down the scale, it's kind of the traditional bottom, middle, top kind of architectural approach. So again, that
But
was
is that
intended
part
to help.
set back? Or is that in the same plane
It's-
as what looks like
it's-
brick?
It's in the same plane as, it's set back a couple inches, but it's in the same plane generally as the brick. The windows do have a little bit of depth to them to create the shadow lines. And again, the deep insets are the ones I was referring to. So when you look at those from the ground, the way, the perspective works obviously is they'll recede and appear to be lower in height when you're looking up, because the foreground projected pieces will feel, look a little bit taller. It's just, the way perspective works.
Well, to move this along, because I'm afraid we're at a little bit of a standstill, but and Stephen, interrupt me if I'm misconstruing what you said, but would you be willing to consider stepping back at that upper level? Stephen, am I reflecting what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit of what they could, like something concrete they could do?
I mean, a setback on the top, above the 62 feet to the 71 on the top floor would be exactly what I was thinking. So I think you put those words in my mouth that I didn't have.
Get back to where though, Stephen?
Basically the purple units perhaps, or no?
Yeah. The purple units for me. I guess there's some yellow ones over there on the west side that are intermixed there. It's, just the frontage on the creek side of that being straight up and down of 71 feet just seems like a lot for me. And I know you've set it back, and I appreciate that. I think that having that abut that fire road like that is just, it's going to seem like a lot when you're on the ground, and especially when you're in the nature area itself over there to the east.
Stephen, would it work to maybe just set it back slightly? So we're talking about retaining the height that they're asking for, but stepping back that upper floor a little bit. What if, could you do it? So you could step it back like 20 feet. I'm sure that they'd come back with, that's going to lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, 7 unit. That's not feasible. Probably. Let's just assume that for a moment. Could a little bit of a step back help you get to that hurdle? Like over that hurdle, like, if you know, I mean, like a few feet, or what are you thinking?
I think the appearance from the ground, I don't think from the creek side seeing 71 feet. So I don't know. I know that we talked, this board talked about that with, was it the Astari project? Or maybe it was the Rimland project, about the center massing being however many feet above the code. And I think I have a similar feeling for this project as well, at least from the creek side.
So you
So-
want to know, Stephen, whether the creek side can meet the zoning, and are you talking at least the purple and probably the yellow units on that?
Yeah, I mean, it would
Southern side?
probably affect the yellow units a little bit as well.
But I guess just to capture that comment, Stephen, is it what you're concerned about is the perception from the walking trail looking vertically, and it may not be removing the entirety of that unit, but stepping that top floor back enough where it's perceived more to be the 62 feet, right?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, so there's no line in the sand that we can draw. It would just be proving that the visual from looking from the creek up would step back enough to that you wouldn't notice that upper floor, you know, as much. So there may be some latitude to change it. Obviously, it does go back to you know, some of the other reasoning that we've already given with the unit mix and density and stuff. But I feel like we're not going to vote tonight anyway. So at least that's a pointed comment that we can at least take back and vet out. And when we come back to the board, obviously you guys are going to have to suffer through the entirety of our presentation again, just so that we do ensure, right, that the other board members have the same information that we have and the planning board recommendation and all the same discussion, hopefully, that we've shared with you today. But at least be able to bring
I
that
want to
back.
clarify something just really quickly, because Stephen, could it be as simple that, that the upper floor of the building, even though it's going over the height limit, you know, so we're still talking about the variance, that upper floor, because maybe it could be set back. It's already a different material, so it's going to read a little differently. But if it was set back like a couple of feet, oh yeah, okay, so we see that there. It's in the straight line, right? But if it was set back a couple of feet, I mean, maybe, but I don't want to design your floor plans, okay? But you know, those are living rooms on that end. You know, maybe even if they were set back just a little bit, you know, and had like, you know, a little like, you know, yeah, exactly like that, like little balcony, something like that, you know, would that make you happy, Stephen?
Yeah, I think that would work. It's just the perception from the ground that is the most concerning part to me on this. And, you know, I mean, it's a beautiful project. I'm not going to lie. It's just the perception from the creek side that has me worried about it.
You know, there's
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Not to kind of design while we're talking, but if there was perhaps a shadow element, an eyebrow of some sort that would kind of give you that height, apparent height, as you looked at the building, and make it appear as if that top floor steps back, because again, you know, it's tough to step it back and keep the dimensions of the bedrooms working, but maybe there's a way to, you know, add a design element that gets you what you're, you know, that makes it again appear, gives a shadow line and a little bit of additional setback, so that again, when you look up, it would appear to be, you know, less tall from the perspective from the ground.
I think Stephen's looking for something more substantive than a shadow line, though. That's why I don't want to you know, like, what if it was, those are your living rooms on that. It looked to be, when I squinted at the plan here. Well, no, there are some bedrooms there. Yeah. Yeah, some of those bedrooms are already pretty small.
I think it would be helpful for you to show the sight lines from a project and I mean, because that's where we often find that it can't be 2 or 3 feet to have that effect. It has to be deeper.
Yeah, it's almost going to be like taking one of these height diagrams and cross sections and showing what the sight line would
exactly. I think we need to, you know, perhaps show the view, the pedestrian view from the creek walk, to show that, what the apparent height might
Okay.
be less.
So we're not going to vote tonight. Megan, how should we do this? So,
Well, I
Make
think
a
at this
motion to
point,
table.
yeah, I would have one of you motion to table this. And again, I would just reiterate to the applicants, I think you've heard it several times. It's not just, they don't want to, the board does not want to just see the pedestrian view of the current design. There will need to be some changes in order for them to, at least two of the members, to consider an approval of the variance at any point on this building. So just to keep that moving. I will say that our fourth member is somewhat familiar from this project as an alternate member of the planning board in early months. So not all of the details, but is familiar. So I know you were concerned about going back to square one, but
Catching up to speed, right?
I think there's some familiarity there, and we can do a brief overview in addressing what changes you're proposing would address the board's concerns will be the
Yeah.
primary focus.
No,
next
that's
month.
perfect. And again, I don't want to misconceive anything either. I don't think we committed to doing it, but we will go back and see if there is a feasible way to answer that comment and then bring back what we have, or, further justification to, if we need to. So that's perfectly understood. So thank you.
So, Megan, I do have a couple questions then. The next meeting date?
The next meeting date is July 6th.
If I could just chime in, Megan,
Yeah.
my personal opinion is I don't want to, I revert to the judgment of the planning board. Like you all said, you've been working on this with them for a while, planning staff, everybody involved. The way I'm approaching your project is just in line with the zoning. And to that end, I would encourage you to renegotiate, to reach back to your seller, assuming everybody's trying to put something forward here. Maybe there's something to be done there too. That's my take. I'm not looking at this as much of the design elements are outside the scope of what I view my role in this process is. And like you said, the board members of the planning board are working on it. But I've just been approaching this through the lens of what you're allowed by right and why it is that you're asking to go beyond that. So.
okay. So, I'll
Yeah,
make
and I just want to set some boundaries as well, Suzanne. There are certain things that we can do, and we will study this step back on the upper level. I mean, it's tangible that we can, evaluate. The seller negotiation, that's fixed. I mean, we have already reduced their parking from the original ask and got them to the bare minimum that they can operate. Again, they have obligations for parking with their own tenants. So you can't drop below that, and for them to be viable ongoing. We have our own parking needs, so there's certain things that we just are up against limitations that we can't control. So you just know that we'll do what we can to study this, but there are other factors that we we'll have a hard time varying from. The 5 members then, when in the other consideration for us is timing, as we were targeting a construction start in August, and if that is missed, we could miss an entire year to our schedule, because seasonality of construction and when you start a project is, in the Northeast, it always drives, when you're getting off the ground. Will all 5 board members be here on the 6th? Or can you know that?
And you should also know that we don't have 5 right now. We currently have 4.
Okay.
We have 1 vacancy. The July meeting is a standing meeting, but I have not yet confirmed that all 4 will be here. Yes, I can reach out to see for the 4th member. I don't know. I'm sure the members who are here right now can tell you might be able to tell you that they'll be here or not. But I don't know is the answer.
Okay. And is it just a simple majority needed or is it greater than that?
3 is needed, right?
Okay.
As of now, 3 is needed, yeah.
Is it possible to call a special meeting, knowing that that's 4th of July weekend and just?
That's also a very full agenda for that
Yeah, we
meeting
have
for
a
us.
very, I will need to speak to the board, and it's not something we'll decide with, we'll decide amongst the board how we're going to proceed with this agenda, and we can let you know if there's any changes, but as of now, we should plan on the 6th of July.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we table this, or what's the word I'm looking for,
Yep.
Megan? We're extend this to a July meeting. Is there a second?
To a July meeting just yet. We got to discuss. We're pretty. I'd like to just table the motion, but or have the applicant table it of their own
You
accord.
can, the board can table it, and then we will work on the agenda and let them know, so.
When is the agenda due? Because we'll be ready if that's the question. We'll be ready for that meeting whenever you make the agenda, because I don't know if I misunderstood that, but we don't want to withdraw our application and have to reapply and
No, you're not
notice
withdrawing.
Oh, okay.
We're just determining whether we will be holding one meeting or whether we will need to have a special meeting because of the number of
sure.
appeals.
Okay.
And that's what we
Prior
have to get back to on.
prior to this discussion right now, we were considering having more than one July meeting because
Just because of your workload. Yeah, understood. Okay. I don't think I heard that correctly. So thank you.
So is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Just 1 second, please.
Sorry.
So just while with the motions on the table, I will poll the members. Mr. Barkin,
Yes.
Mr. Henderson,
Yes.
and Ms. Charles.
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off, Jeff. You can go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry to cut you off. The need to go then back to planning board for would this change the secret determination in any way, Brian?
I feel like it would, if it's something that we can achieve and still be able to provide the revisions that this board is comfortable with approving, and we get the approval for whatever we present back to them, that sounds to me like it would not have a drastic change, because I think we've already established that something either drastic with parking or drastic with units is not viable for the project, and seeker wouldn't matter and the variance wouldn't matter at that point. So I think the changes that we're talking about currently would not have a significant revision enough to the project to alter any of the part 3 recommendations that we've already been through in terms of the mass and scale of the building and the parking and everything else that we've already explained. So I don't think it would impact seeker necessarily.
Yeah.
I would say that the answer to that is that because of this board's feedback, you would be reducing in your building.
Yeah.
So you would be reducing impacts rather. If you feel that you need to make any changes that would increase something in another spot, that could be a different issue, but it also, correct. It's my understanding that the board is making some corrections to the seeker at their next meeting anyway, so.
The only thing of concern, Megan, would be if we reduce parking, and I don't believe we can reduce parking based on the requirements and what we did. Reducing units, I concur with everything that the impacts wouldn't affect seeker. So I think our goal is to look at, stuff that Stephen brought up this evening and bringing it back. And we hope, David, you understand that our position that we have some hurdles with site constraints. And I'm going to just put the last one in there. Since COVID has hit, construction costs between concrete, steel, and et cetera have gone through the roof. So if we start eliminating units, those are the things that make a project, feasible. Parking doesn't make it feasible. That's a net zero. So we really don't want to come in and say, hey, we take out the entire top floor, because all that does is puts a detriment to this project, and it potentially leaves it with a parking lot and a abandoned building on the site. Because I don't believe the seller will ever change his requirements to anyone and how he wants to sell this site. So over the next month, we will make the revisions, and we just hopefully you thoughtfully consider what position we're in, the additional money that the development team has put into this project to make it work, and what's going on in the world has also done that they haven't pulled back and said, we want to leave Ithaca, that they still want to invest in Ithaca, I think is a great testament to what you have in the community. So we would ask for your three support at the next meeting, and we look forward to presenting that.
Yeah, and one final question, and this may be more for you, Brian and James. I'm assuming the planning board, we can't get site plan approval until we get through BZA. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. We could still work through some of the remaining items like the planting materials and some of the more pointed things for our site plan process and have it queued up, but they wouldn't be able to approve the project without the compliance with zoning, and in this case, the relief that's needed for height.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so
They have our feedback.
I think you have our
and-
feedback.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Yeah, and we will see you most likely in July. So I think we can end this part of the meeting, right, Megan?
Yes. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, so in terms of the rest of our agenda, I'm a little behind on minutes. I know you look forward to reading them, but I will bring them back to you soon. So I believe that is the last item on our agenda for this evening. So, Ms. Charles, if you want to adjourn, we can.
Okay.